Hey, good evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Political Deep Dive tonight. I'm Dave Valente. Tonight, we're talking about Iran and the Iranian women's revolt. Before I bring on my guest host, I wanted to maybe ask yourself, why is Dave wearing a old school Atlanta Thrashers hockey jersey? Just want to. I hit the wrong button. Ha! The Thursday Night Hockey Show comes on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Invites you to join us. Also, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on any of our other platforms, head on over to YouTube and give us a like, a share, a subscribe. Click on that bell to get a reminder when we go live. When I go live on both the this show and when I go live on the hockey show, so you catch all the fun content that I produce each week. So, let me go ahead and bring on our co-host this week, the man, the myth, the legend, Dan Fishman.
Oh, hello. Sorry. I like it when people have like something with the spontaneity of a rocket ship taking off.
Oh, wow. I'm doing all kinds of good stuff here. Here we go.
You are the master of the airways. Happy to be back on the show. Let me ask you something about the Thursday Night Hockey Show.
Yes, sir.
If I wanted to find it, is it on the same channel as this
one? It is on the same channel.
So there's a double reason to subscribe.
That's right. Yeah. Not only do you get quality political content, but you also get quality hockey content. This past week, we did I did a prediction show going through all the conferences and the major awards. And I think it's going to be a really good year for the New York Rangers this season. So
I got to go.
I know it pains me to say that because I'm not a Rangers fan at all.
You know what? If it's an original 6 team, I'm okay with it.
I'm not.
That's
pretty much how I do it.
Hope springs eternal for me and the Bruins, who have a shot. They're not terrible.
They're not. They're not. They just don't have any secondary scoring. That's the problem with the Bruins this year.
Yep.
And also joining us this evening, the birthday girl.
Happy birthday to
21 years old. 20 years old, barely drinking.
To you.
AJ and Louis the Liberty Dog.
Somewhere.
He'll appear later in the show. We're also on TikTok tonight. If you're on TikTok watching us, you can always hop on over to YouTube if you want to like, share, subscribe, make some comments. Like we already got some comments in the you really need a Wednesday night football show. I'm thinking about doing a Saturday night one talking about college football and then previewing the NFL next year, but I'm not really sure. Let's see other comments. So yeah, let us know what you like and what you want. So
yeah, and guys, if you have something you'd like for us to talk about, throw it in the chat. We're not. I mean, except for you, Larry, we know you want to talk about your dachshund. We're not talking about dachshunds anymore. But other than that, if you've got a political topic, something like that, please throw it in the chat, and we're happy to talk about it.
The man, the myth, the legend, Steve Sheets, the man of the electric lemonade.
Yep. And the electric lemonade known as 3 Sheets to the Wind.
Oh, Steve Sheets to the Wind.
Steve Sheets to the Wind, exactly.
All right. So tonight I wanted to talk about Iran. If you've followed this show for a while, you know that Iran is kind of a passionate thing for me. Like I've studied Iran in college and I've kept up with it. I follow the news and I've done 3 episodes of the Political Deep Dive on Iran. 2 were back-to-back episodes on the history of United States-Iranian relations. And then we did a shorter one when the channel was on the Libertarian Party's channel. back in June of 21. So, um, it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. So, let me just give you a little bit of background of what we're talking about tonight. If you haven't been following the news, um, on September 13th, a young lady named Amini, I'm sorry, Mahsa Amini, was arrested by Iranian morality police. Um, in Iran, you have regular police, you have their secret police, and then you have the morality police. And the morality police uh, go around and make sure that you're properly covered, your head is covered. If you're a woman, it's not really cool. I'd hate to live under that kind of system. But she was not compliant with the hijab rule, which is the woman's head should be covered with a headscarf called a hijab. Um, 3 days after she was arrested on September 16th, she was dead, and the authorities have blamed a pre-existing health condition on the reason why she died. She was a 22-year-old young lady. Her parents dispute the claim that she had a pre-existing heart condition, and her death has sparked 3.5 weeks of protests in Iran, which have eclipsed the Green Revolution, the 99 student protest. This has been the longest period of civil unrest in Iran since the 78-79 Iranian Revolution. Um, it's daily and it's growing. So this is a very pertinent issue to talk about, especially what I'm starting to see within this issue is there are many parallels with what happened in 1978-79 with the way that the protests in response to government crackdowns on them are growing rather than shrinking. The bravery of the people to actually call for death to the Shah, or sorry, to the death to Ayatollah, and death to the Iranian Republican Guards and the morality police is actually a change. This did happen to an extent during the Green Movement, um, but this is much more out there, and it's crazy to think how far Iran has come. But and we'll get into this a little bit later, but this is really growing out of the previous protests for the student protest in '99, the Movement in 2009, and now we're talking about a new movement for women's rights within Iran in 22. Um, I kind of open it up to questions. If you guys have any questions about what's going on in Iran or why Iran it does what it does,
I think
open.
one thing to talk about too is that although there is state-run media in Iran, there actually is private media from the United States that is broadcast via satellite television. And so it's not just Voice of America Persia, which can be received via satellite, but Iranians in exile,
Yeah.
for want of a better word, based out of LA. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Los Tarangelis
See,
is how it's called. Los Angeles has a large now. When there's issues where there's a large refugee population coming to the United States generally settles them in a couple of different areas, but very concentrated. So, like the Bosnians when they came over in the 90s, they were settled in like St. Louis and a couple of the Rust Belt cities. Large number of the Iraqi and Middle Eastern populations are settled for some reason in Dearborn, Michigan, which I don't understand why you would settle them in such a cold area. But
it's
um,
about Ford.
yeah,
The assembly line. Lots of Croatians in Chicago.
yeah, yeah. So Tehran or the Iranian diaspora after the '79 revolution, a lot of them settled in either Atlanta or, for the most part, in Los Angeles. Um, and In fact, I think the Shah's wife, the queen, former queen of Iran, still lives in LA, I believe. And they bankroll a lot of the media that comes out of Los Angeles.
Yep,
Um,
and so, like in 2003, when there was another, big anti-government movement, a lot of it was broadcast and sort of inspired out of what was happening on the networks from Los Angeles that were sponsoring. And so,
Mhm.
Iran is not a country that has always been ruled by despots. Now, the Shah was a despot, right? He was a dictator, no question about it. These guys are dictators too. However, under previous regimes, there was more freedom. I believe that under the Shah, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, women did not have to dress in a secular fashion. They
Uh,
could wear. Go ahead.
Actually, he modeled it more off of the Ataturk model, which did kind of ban some Islamic, especially in the cities, banned more the Islamic headwear and things like that. He wasn't quite as repressive as Ataturk was when it comes to Islamic dress, but there were some there was
But
some give and take between the clergy and Iran and the Iranian government.
but certainly women were not arrested for not wearing hijab when the
No,
Shah was in power.
no.
And I think we should plug our favorite movie about this, Persepolis, which you guys can find. It's animated and it is just
Yes.
probably the best history of modern times.
Yeah, Marjane Satrapi, French Iranian graphic novelist, came up with Persepolis as a uh, kind of an explainer of what happened to the '79 revolution, and really from a child's perspective, from a young adult's perspective of what they went through, how bad it got under the Shah towards the end, and there was hope once the Ayatollah came in, and then it just kind of got dashed
Right.
as you get into the early '80s, and then you start talking about things like the Iraq invasion of Iran, and then it becomes even worse, the crackdown. So
Yeah.
um,
And that's a crazy thing too. A lot of people, I think, aren't aware of the origins of the Iraq-Iran war and how long it went on for. So I
mhm,
think I'm just asking questions for the general audience. Can you
sure.
tell us a little bit about that, about how that started
Yeah, back in 1980, right after Saddam Hussein had taken power in Iraq in the mid '70s, uh,
in
really
the
cleaned
Ba'athist
out the Ba'athist
Revolution?
revolution. Yeah, the Ba'ath Party was already in power.
Yeah,
He just seized power from his uncle and cleaned house. I mean, if
yeah,
you ever want to see a chilling video, it's the first Ba'ath Congress that Saddam presides over. They just sit there and read off names, and they drag people out of the hall, and then in the background you can hear shots,
yep,
like, and everybody's like, "I love you, you're great."
yep,
But in 1980, right after the Ayatollah comes to power, and it becomes officially the Islamic Republic. And we'll get into a little bit of how the Islamic Republic became. Um, oh yeah, yes, definitely. That is an absolutely wonderful book. But um, uh, so 1980, the Islamic Republic comes in. Ayatollah is officially the Veliat Ifaki, the guardian of the country, and rules as the guardian of the country. And Saddam Hussein invades because he wants the Abadan province, which is to the if you look at a map of Iraq, it's southeast of Iraq from the Basra region. So the Basra is where at the very bottom end of Iraq, where they have a very limited port to ship stuff out of. They wanted Abadan because Abadan is the main oil region of Iran. Most of their oil supply is there. Um, the Iran-Iraq war goes on for 8 years. The United States, because we didn't like Iran at the time, started arming the Iraqis, and there's always that famous video of Donald Rumsfeld meeting with Saddam Hussein and
yep,
us giving him things to create biological weapons, and those biological weapons were used during the war against the Iranians. A lot of Iranian dead in not only in the from the uh, military community. The war fighters were killed with mustard gas and sarin and things like that. But it was fired into cities too. So
Chemical weapons used,
yeah,
weapons of mass destruction.
yeah. So that runs from 1980 until 1988. You know, the United States does get kind of a guilty conscience about him using chemical weapons, primarily against his own people. But you know, there are things that happen within the Gulf region. The Iranian air shoot down of I believe it was 87,
Yep.
and it it we end up brokering peace in the region. Eventually, it ends in 1988, and right after that, the Ayatollah Khomeini, the you know the linchpin of the revolution, dies. If you want to see a really weird thing, Google his funeral. What happens with his funeral, because they wouldn't let him bury Khomeini. They actually had to do it in secret a couple times, and they got found out. And in Islamic law, that you need to have the body buried within the first 24 hours, like by
Right.
Sunday.
It's like
And
Orthodox Judaism for people who are
yeah, they
familiar.
could not get him buried because of the people trying to get into the coffin and take, you know,
Selfies.
souvenirs and stuff like that. You know, they didn't have eBay back in the day to sell that stuff, but you know, it was really interesting time. So um, the new guy comes in, and his name is almost the same. It's Khamenei instead of Khomeini, and a lot of people get tripped up by that. Khamenei is the new leader, and he continues to be the Ayatollah, the Grand Ayatollah of Iran to this day.
Mhm.
Um,
Eh,
like I
it-
mentioned,
I
yeah,
just would say important to distinguish Ayatollah of Iran, Ayatollah of rock and rolla, not the same person.
not the same person.
Okay.
um,
I believe
so
Howard Stern is the Ayatollah of rock and
I
rolla.
do believe he is. Yes. Um, so we go into the you know the 90s were an interesting time in Iran where they actually flirted with openness towards the United States. Towards the end of the decade, they had an election. An outsider gets uh, elected president. Um, you know, for a lot of people, they don't understand that Iran is a democracy, kind of. The Iranian supreme leader, the Ayatollah, or his guardian council, can make selections of who can actually run, and they kind of fell asleep at the switch on this one. And Mohammad Khatami was the president of Iran for 2 terms. Um, was seen as a reformer. There was openness to the United States. In fact, my professor of Iranian relations actually did um, uh, a State Department sanctioned trip to study in Iran for a year during this time, and lived in Iran, studied at the University of Tehran, and um, it it was an interesting time. But after that, the Iranian government really cracked down. They elect a guy named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Iranian names are hard. I'll just say that right now. But Ahmadinejad was a hardliner. He was an actually nationalist, populist, kind of like a right wing nationalist that we have now. So,
What and when we say elected, we're talking like incredible popularity, right? I think 98% of the people voted for him.
well, no, actually, in the first election, they it wasn't so much that it was 98% of the people elected him. It was that they took all the reformist candidates and kicked them off the ballot. So it was like Iran has always had a history of having the yes versus yes sir parties, and that's kind of what happened there. You only had a few choices, and they weren't that good. And Ahmadinejad, who was a popular mayor of Tehran, a populist, was promising all kinds of economic reforms to give people more opportunities, comes to power. Um, and really immediately he just becomes this kind of overseas or he really focuses on overseas stuff. He starts talking about, you know, Holocaust denialism, hosting conferences on it. He talks about, America is the great Satan. So he's, you know, bringing Iran back to the anti-American stance it had had since the revolution.
And he talks about developing ballistic missiles
Hmm.
to be able to bomb Israel and then eventually Europe. And then
So
famously, go
who's
ahead.
a trivia question I like to ask people is which country helped Iran start their nuclear program?
France, America.
Yes.
United States in
Of course it is,
1950s
yeah.
had a program called Atoms for Peace.
Hmm.
And started giving the universities in Iran the technology to actually build the centrifuges and all that stuff to learn how to do their own nuclear. Now, of course, the thinking was peaceful nuclear
Right.
use that then they can say instead of powering their country with their own fuel, they can start doing with nuclear fuel.
Now, this was during the Shah's era.
Yes, this was during the Shah's era. It was like a series of packages they gave that the United States did to prop up the Shah after the Mossadegh revolution back in 1953.
Well, and so I think that there's a really interesting conversation to be had about that part of it too, about how Nasser and his, a curse on both your houses, leaving the United States or the Western fold and getting chummy with the Russians makes the West panic about power structures in the Middle East. And one of the things we talk about all the time. You guys probably heard of the Aswan Dam, this
Mhm.
giant dam project that is built in Egypt that dammed up the Nile and actually
Damn it!
was horrific for the rest of Egypt because Egypt depended on the flooding of the Nile to distribute nutrients and for
Yeah.
their uh, for most of their food. In fact, there was a giant famine afterwards. But what had happened was the United States was helping Egypt to build it, and Nasser, who was Gamal Nasser, who's the president of Egypt at the time, doesn't like the strings that the United States is putting on their aid, and so he says, "You know what? I'll go to the Russians." And the Russians are like, "We're happy to help. And you want to build a dam? If we can build a wall, we don't think a dam would be that much different." And so the Russians helped them, but it wasn't that helpful. But losing that ally, and Egypt had been a British ally for forever,
Yeah.
losing them really put a fear into the West and made them say, you know what, we have to support dictators that we wouldn't normally do deals with because we need this balance because we don't want the Russians to take over the Middle East. And so here's my trivia question to you, Dave. How many communist countries were there before World War II? AJ
Hmm.
knows.
What? Just the
There's
one?
the Soviet Union, and I can't think of anything
That's
else.
it. Just the one. And so you
Yeah.
think about it, we have this all the communist threat and all that stuff. Before Russia, the Soviet Union expands, there's only one communist country. And the West has this fear that, they lost all of Eastern Europe. What if they lose the Middle East as well? And so
Yeah.
there are all these policies, asymmetrical deterrence, Avril Harriman, and all that stuff. And so what happens in Iran is a lot of really strategic American planning, and should be a lesson to all of us. What happens when you try to strategically plan for
Someone
another
else.
country?
Yeah, someone else's lives. And yeah, the further history back between say World War II and the let's say the big feast in Persepolis, the early 70s,
Yeah.
which if you ever get this is another video you should completely watch is the early 1970s party in Persepolis that the Shah hosts. This really is kind of one of the matches that was thrown on the tinderbox of Iranian politics, and that the lavish spending that they did on this party. But
When the people are starving.
Yeah, when the people are starving, people don't have jobs, and the people that we're actually celebrating the 1500th anniversary of the Persian Empire is I'm sorry, 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire uh, was that none of the Iranians were welcome there. It was just the Shah, some of his inner circle, and all the foreign dignitaries that were brought in there and feted. And um, I used to have the number, but it was an obscene number for a 3-day party. So,
And,
um,
And then, one other thing with a little more Iran trivia to throw in there is why is Iran the KKK's favorite Middle Eastern country?
Because Iran means Aryan.
Yep, it's
So,
true.
and that's actually why the previous Shah Mohammad Reza Shah, the Shah, last Shah of Iran, his father was deposed in World War II. He renamed the country from Persia. It was the Persian Empire. Renamed it to Iran. Said I wanted to be called Iran on the diplomatic stage, and this is like 1933, and all of a sudden the Germans are like, "Hey, you're our kind of people." And
Yeah.
it was kind of a close relationship as we run up to World War II,
Yep.
and the Brits and the Russians, who have a history of meddling within Iran, deposed Reza Shah Pahlavi, sent him to Egypt, or I'm sorry, South Africa, where he eventually died, um, and installed his 18-year-old son into the seat, in the peacock. It's called the Peacock Throne, the former palace of Iran, the former Persian Empire. So,
I just want
but
to answer Janice's question quickly. Janice,
yeah,
I'm drinking Sweet Baby Jesus chocolate porter stout. It's fantastic.
yes, chocolate peanut butter porter. There's some good ones. If as we get closer to the holidays, I know that Yingling, which is a nice local beer for us, they do a chocolate porter, Hershey's chocolate porter, which is very
Interesting.
delicious, very good.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off, but I do like that thing of when people tell me that they support the Aryan nation. I say, "Oh, you mean Iran?"
Iran? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Iran, Aryans are not blonde hair, blue eyed people. They are uh, the word comes from the area of not only Iran but east towards Pakistan and some of the Indus Valley civilizations. That's where Aryans come from. So, um, what kind of beer do you drink, Craig? But
Old
yeah,
man.
Old man
man
beer
beer.
is Miller High Life.
Is it Natty
Is
Boat?
it?
I,
Oh,
I
no.
think so. I was at one of my birthday parties. Somebody gave me a case of Miller because it says on it the champagne of beers, and then they gave me a case of Andre Champagne, which they claimed is the beer of champagnes, and so it worked out well.
I was thinking because you're up northeast, I was thinking
Budweiser.
you're doing Narragansett or something like that.
I do like Narragansett. I would say of the local beers that have gone large, Rolling Rock was always my favorite. Old 33 from Latrobe, Pennsylvania. But then obviously in Boston, Sam Adams was our local beer. I will say that objectively speaking, Sam Adams makes a damn fine product.
Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to go to the store soon.
Be right back, y'all.
All right.
I'll see you in a minute.
So, but let's come back around now. Let's talk about what we're seeing out of these protests in Iran and the response that we're seeing from the Iranian government to them.
Yeah. So,
Can I ask a question before you
yeah,
get
sure.
started?
Yes.
Okay, like the age group of the women that are actually out protesting, what age group are we talking about?
We are talking young women. So we're talking uh, s- a little bit older than school age and I'm talking about like,
Yeah.
high
Let's say
school
18 to 30.
Yeah, 18 to 30. It's a gendering older people as well, but that's who's driving the movement. As
Right.
it did with the movement in 1979 is the 78, 79 is that it was the young people that got out and started turning on the Shah. It's the young people that are getting out and turning on the Ayatollah right now. Um, uh, so as with most things, and kind of think about this in terms of our Bill of Rights. When this started happening from September 16th on, the first thing the Iranian government did in response was to crack down violently on non-armed protesters because they don't have uh, freedom to own weapons in Iran. They cut off the internet on press, so the press was abrogated. Again, the your movement is monitored, and they can go into your homes anytime they want to. So there's a lot of parallels about what we put in our Bill of Rights of things that we want to prevent when a country or when a government goes nutso, um, and what's going on in Iran and what's been going on in Iran for a long time with a lot of this stuff. But in response to what's happened is that women in Iran have begun to willingly take off their hijab, even though the police will go after them. Not only willingly take off their hijab, but they'll burn it, kind of like the 1960s counterculture where
Burning the
women were
bra.
taking off their bras and burning them. This it may not sound like a big controversial thing to just take off a head covering and burn it, but this is very controversial. This is a threat to Iranian to the Ayatollahs and
Well, it's two things. It's the threat, it's the rebellion against authority, but
Mhm.
also it's the fact that it's women who are supposed to be subservient. And so it
That
is a double whammy.
and to an extent. Right now, Iran is a Shiite country, and for people who don't, I know you're going to go do your joke about Shiites.
Yes.
Uh,
If you're not
Okay.
if you're not Sunni, you're Shiite.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a brand of the Shiite faith. There's several different brands of Shiism that go off of who the final imam that they recognize is, and this is the last of those Shiite breakaways, and it's called the Twelver Shia. And to the Shiites, the Ayatollah is you could compare it to the Pope, but he is. I mean, he's directly the mouth of God to people on this earth. So what he says goes. So to take off your hijab and burn it when he said that you have to wear it, that's spitting in the face of God to the clerics and the people in control. Yeah, I get that. So um uh
And,
not
and
only
here-
they not only the burning the hijabs, they're also doing something that is very controversial for women in Iran, and that is cutting their hair. They're just grabbing it up into a bun, and they're just chopping it off, and it's now because you can always put a hijab back on and cover it up, but really it's the outward vision of I'm protesting the government. I'm getting out of the government because if you're going to do all that, you're not going to wear a hijab. So you're not only showing that you're not wearing the hijab, but you're cutting your hair in in disobeyance of the authority of the Ayatollah, and I think that's really cool.
yeah,
It's
and
amazing.
Yeah.
exactly. And one of the really interesting things about it is that, what's different about this revolution than the previous ones is that the technology is there for a lot of things. And even though the internet has been turned off in a lot of places, they can't shut down the network.
Yeah.
Can't stop the signal, Mal. And one of the interesting things is that Apple, in particular, has a product out there. We were talking about the final Imam. Apple's introducing the iMom, and sorry, that joke also could not be resisted. I'll be here all week.
Oh my God. All right, we're gonna have to mute Dan. There we go.
It's the sweet baby Jesus.
I think, yeah, it's the sweet baby Jesus talking. He's
Right,
got
the
he's got
heresy.
the fear of Jesus in him.
Exactly, it's heresy.
Um, so, but it's cool when you think about it because 99 you have the student protest. 2009, those students who protested in 99 are now adults, young adults who are voting, second, third time, and discontent with the obviously stolen election with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's second election. It was quite clear he had lost by a substantial margin, and it was announced that he had won by quite the opposite number. And
That was
then
a 98% one or 96% or something.
yeah, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was ridiculous based off of people just like, yeah, we know the numbers. We were doing the numbers at the polls, and then all of a sudden the numbers changed. But over the last 10 years, there's growing discontent. We've really stubbed our foot in the region. Talking about the murder of the Iranian general, the shoot, the um, the almost war that we have over that. And But this 22 hijab protest, these are the kids of those young adults back in 2009 that are getting involved into politics, that are and getting involved into this protest and really driving this. But you have two generations now that are a little more emboldened. They were emboldened in 2009, but that generally fizzled out. Now you've got two generations of people who are not afraid to go after the government. And we've already gone 3.5 weeks. This is far longer than the 99 student revolution. There's been, you know, anniversary remembrances of the Green Movement, but really that was only a few days that the protests, the large protests, were happening. But this one's been going 3 weeks. Every major Iranian city, every the diaspora in multiple countries are protesting at the embassies of Iran, although there's no embassy in the United States. But there's quite a movement that continues to really build here.
Well, and of course, there's one country that is steadfast in its support of Iran because Iran is giving them drones to fight. It's the Russians.
Yep.
So politics makes strange bedfellows.
And Russia, I mean, you can't study Iranian history and not see Russia all throughout its history. I mean, back in the great game politics of
Cold War.
no, before the Cold War, well before,
Okay.
like before World War One, the great game politics where countries were using these other countries as pawns. This is the British and the Russians fought over Iran or Persia at that time. The Darcy concession that led to the forming of the company that eventually becomes British Petroleum. Um, it, but the Russians have had throughout their history movements into and out of Iran. And during the last 10 years, when we talk about nuclear enrichment and nuclear getting nuclear weapons for the Iranians, the Russians have helped quite a bit. So the Russians are there. Their fingerprints are all over Iran.
And
And
it's an interesting thing too, because the one thing that the Russians feared the most back when they were the Soviets was the loss of the southern republics to militant Islam. Okay,
yeah,
they didn't want to get into that fight, and so here they are with an interesting thing where they say, you know what, this is one of the big supporters of one half of militant Islam, and we can get them on our side. And
yeah,
so again, it's a politics of strange bedfellows.
it is. It's interesting to see. It really was. They tried to make Iran a communist country. They had the 2-day party in Iran, and Mohammad Mossadegh, who was not a communist, he was a socialist. And nothing makes me angrier than listening to people conflate communism and socialism. They're bedfellows, but they're not completely in bed together. Um, but yeah, so the they wanted to make a communist country out of Iran, but they're quite happy with the Islamic Republic because it is one. It's a country that actually really controls its population. So it's not, as long as they're on the same side and they're funneling the money, they're not going to send Hezbollah up to Chechnya to raise havoc. They're going to focus Hezbollah on Israel. So
Right.
that's been the Ayatollah's MO for a long time. So
Yeah, and so I think one of the interesting things in that thing too is that now, as we talk about where things are going in the future, this is a time in the world that is unbelievably tense.
oh yeah.
So I to tell a sort of a personal story. Not the other day, so Tuesday night, I live near Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden we heard tons of aircraft flying around, and artillery being fired, and there's a bunch of military bases around me, and we were like, "Man, what is going on?" It was at night, so you couldn't really see anything, and I didn't really know anybody to call. I ended up calling Holly Ward, who wanted me to know aircraft identification. I'm like, "I can't see them," but I'm like,
It's
"Have you heard?"
nighttime.
Exactly. Have you heard anything? The next day, I talked to one of my neighbors, and they're like, "Oh, there was a giant fireworks display over at Mount Vernon." I couldn't see it because in the middle of the forest, but it's one of those things that we're really tense right now. There's a
Yeah.
big powder keg, and people don't know what's going to go on, and all these little things that are happening at the same time are somewhat related. And I think for the Iranians, they have an opportunity that is unique because as much as they might like to, the Russians can't do anything to really help Iran at this point in time.
No, not
They
at
have
all.
got their hands full.
Not
And
at all.
yeah, Iraq, who are the powers that would come to Iran's aid? There isn't really anybody. And so, for Iran to maintain this regime, they're either going to have to get extremely brutal in their crackdown, or there are going to be some concessions made. And so, with any luck, we're in a situation where, we might be able to see a freer, more independent Iran.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before. For those of you who followed my congressional campaign in 2012, one of the things that I talked about was that I thought the United States should say, you know what, our standard for countries that we will have strong foreign relations with ought to be complete suffrage. Women should have full equality in every country in which women have exactly the same rights as men. Then great, we can have relations with them. That means we're not going to do business with Saudi Arabia anymore. We're not going to do business with countries where women can't own or inherit property, like Iran, places like that. With any luck, Iran is going to change. Hopefully, I actually think that there's a really good chance of it happening. The only thing that can really derail it is if the West gets involved and screws it all up. Because
I
Yeah.
was about to say,
Yep.
the only way
Yeah.
that this is going to be really, really jacked up is if the United States is like, "Hey, let me help you," because we don't have our own crap going on, right?
Yeah. Keep John Bolton away from
Yeah.
the region
Has our
completely.
interference ever actually helped anybody? Just real question.
Back um back
Neat.
early before, like, during World War One and that era, we were actually seen as the good guys in Iran because we we actually provided them a blueprint of how to do things, and we were not like trying to tell them this is how you have to do it, and this is the solution we made for you. It's, hey, this is what we did. You can do it, take it or leave it. We had some good advisors there. Um, but the everything that we've done in Iran is, and everything that Iran hates us for, is well earned. Like, you can go through Operation Ajax, which is where we took out the Prime Minister Mossadegh. You can go through the creation of Savak with the Israeli Secret Service, or the Mossad, that brutally repressed the people of Iran. You can go through the support of the Shah after he was deposed, and the Iranians kept asking for the Shah to be returned to Iran to face trial, and the United States refused to do it, although they kind of wanted to. But the Shah was incredibly sick at the time when he finally left Iran. He was being killed by cancer and had come to the Mayo Clinic. He eventually dies in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt. But the that remained a sore point, and of course the hostage crisis, our attempts to retrieve the hostages. Um, uh, there's just so many instances within U.S. Iranian history. There's a reason why the government hates us and why there's some enmity within the people of Iran. Although I think, as with all countries, I think the people can separate um, the the government of the United States and the people of the United States. I think if you went to Iran, you'd probably be welcomed with open arms. In fact, I know everybody that I've talked to that has gone to Iran has been treated like royalty when they go there.
There's an excellent Rick Steves
Oh
travel
yes,
in Iran. I can't recommend it to people enough.
yeah, fantastic, fantastic show. There's a travel log, and I'll share the link after the show. But there's a guy that traveled across Iran on a motorcycle, and I know Persian porn is somewhere in the title of it, but I mean, it's kind of a sideshow of the entire book. He does a lot of really great travel logs with going across these countries, but it was. Yeah, the people of Iran like Americans. They don't like our government, which is justified.
Because we don't like it either.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just saying. I mean,
that makes 4 of us at this point, you know? And I think if we can get past our governments, I think there can be good relationships with Iran. I think our current government, their current government, we can get past that. I think there can be a good, uh,
Fingers crossed.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. My prediction for what's going to happen in Iran in the next few weeks is that I do think that the Iranian government is going to wrongly headed try and crack down even more brutally on the protests. They're going to get to a point where they say, "Okay, this is enough," and they're going to do the dumb thing and not understand that this is what happened. What the Shah did, you know, in Iran as he was losing power, and this could lead to the end of the Ayatollah's rule in Iran. Hopefully, and I don't know if I want to say hopefully, but for the lack of loss of life sake, um, the Ayatollah recognizes that his authoritarian rule has to be tempered, and that he needs to give more freedom to the people. I don't know that he can do it. I mean, he's an old guy. He's an old guy cut in the cloth of Ayatollah Khomeini, his predecessor. But we'll see. These next few weeks, you're right, Dan. The Russians being uh, preoccupied with Ukraine, there's no one going to help the Iranian government maintain control at this point. So the Russians might get involved in some ways, just because Iran is actually helping them with their war. So there might be a little bit of a trade off, but
I do think
logistics or something along those lines.
I do think it speaks to, sort of the change in power too, the power dynamics that Iran is giving drones to the Russians. You
Yeah.
think of the Russians as, a reasonably sophisticated and competent country, but in fact, Russia's
Watching
had
war.
Russia's had an unbelievable brain drain over the last 30 years. And it just accelerated again when Putin came to power.
Yeah.
Whereas Iran, is a country with a tradition of scholarship. And, they had, before the revolution, just amazing scientific programs. And they still have, they're strong in the sciences, at least as strong as you can be in a theocracy.
Yeah.
And I do think it's fair to call them a theocracy.
They are a theocracy. The government is a theocracy. Yes, they actually have universal suffrage. They actually have elections, but again, the Guardian Council picks the candidates. So it's kind of like the Democrats and Republicans. They get to pick who gets to be on the ballot, but we don't. So it's only one person or a small group of people making those selections. And
I would argue that if the Republicans had been able to pick the person, Donald Trump wouldn't have been president. But
you would think, but who out of the 16 people that wouldn't get out of the race would be that person? That's the question.
Exactly. Jeb.
Yeah.
Damn you, Jeb.
Jeb. Please clap. The one thing I will say before we wrap this up is that with Iran, there are several power centers within the country. First is the clerical. They're the ones in ascendancy within Iran, or that have been in ascendancy with Iran. They have controlled Iran for the last 30 years now, 40 years now. I'm sorry. God, it's 40 years. Wow.
Time flies.
Yeah. And then you have the students, the young people, the university educated students. They're another power center within Iran. And then you have the bazaris, the local entrepreneurs, the shopkeepers. If the shopkeepers really join the students and the young people in this revolution, it's game over. If you lose two of the legs of the stool, it's going to fall. And you got the students right now, but if the shopkeepers really get into it, then it's going to be
You said stool.
stool.
Sorry.
No, we're gonna cut Dan off, man.
You know what? The audience likes it when I drink.
Yes. Okay. Let's share the screen. Are you guys ready for some quizzicals?
I'm ready.
I have not paid attention to anything. So yeah, let's see what happens.
Do this.
Context clues.
Context clues. Let's take a look at the pictures as they scroll by. Oops. I gotta add it first. There we go. All right. We see the rocket. We see the devastation. We see Loretta Lynn.
I'm proud to be a coal miner's daughter.
Yep.
I want everybody to, after this, go to YouTube and listen to Van Lear Rose, which is the album that Loretta Lynn made with Jack White, and it's fantastic.
All right. Question number 1. Which airline announced it's suspending service at New York's JFK Airport, saying its schedule is too small to remain competitive? American, United, Spirit, or Delta?
I'm going to guess it's the airline that sucks your spirit. Spirit Airlines.
I'm thinking Spirit as well. What do you think, AJ? Oh,
I've never flown, so I'll go with y'all.
You've never been on any airplane?
I've been on a small engine airplane for an aviation class that I dropped out of in high school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Dropping out of an airplane class sounds like a long fall. Sorry.
I was hoping the phrasing would get you.
It did. All right, I think we like Spirit.
I like Spirit. I know James says Delta, but I think it's Spirit. I don't think they would cut off American, United, or Delta. Oh, it's United. Now, to be fair, there's several major airports in the New York City metropolitan area. So, losing one airport is probably not huge, but that's amazing. I didn't think it would be one of the big three.
Yeah, and just on the list of things that I'm asking people to look up. Oh boy. Sorry, too much.
Doug, party foul.
Also search for United Breaks Guitars. That's another thing to put on your YouTube list.
What is it?
United Breaks Guitars.
United Breaks Guitars.
Yeah,
oh, yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So question number 2, which new product did Tesla debut at an event this week? Robot, minivan, airplane, or submarine?
Robot.
Yes, it is a robot.
Really?
All right, back to 50%. Dubbed Optimus.
Dubbed Optimus. I've seen stories where people have already screaming for them to make a more human robot, human-looking robot for things.
Yeah.
Stuff.
I mean, first of all, there are already dolls like that.
Yes.
Secondly,
I know what y'all are talking about now. I was like, what? Oh,
yeah.
But secondly, one of the major misconception is that they're, it's like computers. Back in the day, they tried to make computers that were all these sort of single-use computers that could only do. Yes, space dildo. The dildo is indeed correct. These computers that could only do one thing, and then IBM came up with this great idea of making this happy-looking Terminator is good too.
Yeah.
Well, and also if you reverse those things, happy-looking Terminator, fuck you, then
Ow. Ow. With a space dildo.
Yes.
All right. Question number 3. The devastation wrought by Hurricane Ian likely caused how much in damages? 50 million, 100 million, 10 billion, or 50 billion?
Got to be the biggest. Whatever is the biggest number on
Biggest
there, you know
number,
it's going to be
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sanibel Island is going to be that.
I mean, exactly. $50 billion is a drop in the bucket.
It's budget dust.
Yeah, exactly. It's space dildo dust.
All right. Initial damages from the deadly storm estimated to be more than $50 billion. Also dinged overall U.S. economic output, economists say.
I mean,
Yeah, not enough bath salts were manufactured during the.
It is lucky that it's an area, and I don't mean to insult Midwest Florida, but where there's not a lot of stuff that happens there. If something this big had hit like the Gulf Shores where the oil refineries are, something like that, it would be a huge impact on the economy. And it's one of those things that your disaster plan is only as good as the last time you tested it, and the fact that a bunch of people didn't get out is, I'm just telling everybody, man, if you are in the path of a hurricane, if it's going to come within 100 miles of you, you should get out then.
Yes.
Because you can change.
Yeah. I mean, what's the worst that can happen to you if you actually evacuate? I think the only worst thing that can happen is that the hurricane switches and goes where you're going. But
right. But so don't go. Yeah. Don't go up the coast and say, oh, okay, go inland.
Yeah. I saw a TikTok this week where a guy had fled the hurricane. This black guy fled the hurricane and did a Verbo or Airbnb, and it was a plantation with all these slave holding pictures. Like, oh man, that's awful.
One of the things though that I saw people do that I thought was a pretty good idea actually was go to parking garages and park up on the second, third, fourth floor. And people did that like with their pets. And it was very interesting because like for some people, they're like, my dog is going crazy. But at least we're safe in here and I can have the windows open, stuff like that. And another one, she's like, my cat would like me to leave her alone in the car.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably just not put that in the car. Just leave me alone.
Exactly.
All right, question number 4. An independent investigation released this week found systemic abuse and misconduct within which women's professional sport in the United States? Volleyball, basketball, golf, or soccer? I know this one.
I know this one. AJ, we're looking at you.
Yeah, we're looking at you, AJ.
Nice.
I'll say basketball.
I believe what you mean to say was "fuck you, good-looking Terminator robot." Happy Terminator robot.
Space dildo forever.
It's. How about if we told you that Megan Rapinoe plays this sport?
So is that soccer?
It is.
Women's soccer, yeah. In fact, there was a report today that it's continued since that report. So there's going to be more fallout from the report regarding the women's game, the NWSL, the major league there. I just don't get it. Why do this stuff? And
I mean, it's because that we are and have been broken as a society for a long time. There is still a culture, a strong culture that teaches boys that they are more important.
Yep.
And that's bullshit and has to stop. And it happens at a childhood level. And we have to have a system where, even now, right? A lot of times you'll hear, young girls crying, why did was that boy mean to me? And you say, oh, it's because he likes you. No, it's because he's a dick.
Yeah.
It's not because he likes you. And that sort of behavior has to be completely unacceptable. And only until we get there will we get to the point that we don't have this stuff. But remember, in those situations where you are teaching boys and girls, one of my favorite quotes around this, Simone de Beauvoir, if you haven't read The Second Sex, I recommend it very highly. She said, there are two types of people, women and human beings. And when women try to become human beings, they're accused of trying to be men. We're all just human beings.
Yep.
That's the fundamental thing about it. And so every time you can encourage people to behave like human beings and not to behave like, just dicks, you make the planet a better place.
Exactly. Well said. Question number 5. SpaceX and NASA launched a rocket into space Wednesday. What was its destination? The moon, Mars, International Space Station, or Tiangong Space Station? Somebody's got it right out there.
Nice job, Janice. Man, you were like lightning with that.
Yeah, it's the International Space Station.
I also think it's the ISS.
Yeah, I know AJ and I were watching this on Wednesday.
Yeah, I got to wake Colin up with muffins, and I was like, and NASA's going to throw something into space. You want to watch? He goes, well, yeah.
That's cool.
Of course, they started the broadcast at like 7 a.m, and they didn't fire this thing off until noon.
You got to see lots of little interviews and things. It was very cool.
Oh, you got to see him strap him into the cockpit of the Dragon 5.
Like 2 hours.
Yeah,
they're strapped in. Can you imagine?
That's why they get the
Yep.
My ass itches. Like, what do you do about that? Like, oh my God.
I mean, how comfortable can that catheter be?
Right.
It is the International Space Station. So SpaceX and NASA launched a crew of astronauts, including the first Native American woman, first Native American to go into space. And she served against she's the mission commander. So, all right, question number 6, the sad one. Beloved country singer Loretta Lynn died this week at the age of 90. Which music genre was she best known for?
This is like a terrible question.
Yeah, it is.
It is a terrible question because she worked with everybody.
Well, she did work with everybody, but like the people who don't know who Loretta Lynn is, that makes me sad.
Yeah,
this woman is amazing. Yeah. Also on the list of things that I think you need to go look up after this is you need to, I said Van Lear Rose, but you need to listen to Loretta Lynn's The Pill, which came out in 1970, where she talks about now that she's got the pill, her man can't keep her imprisoned anymore by keeping her constantly pregnant. And that's some radical stuff for 1970.
Yeah.
She was a radical human being, honestly.
She was awesome.
One of my favorite things that came out was a picture of her and my Aunt Dottie. They were laughing about something backstage. My cousin and I were talking. You think they were making fun of some man? She's like, they were definitely making fun of some man.
It's awesome.
Oh no.
She has another song that I love called Fist City, and that's a fun one to listen to as well.
She's good.
All right, question number 7. New York Yankees slugger Aaron Judge hit a record-breaking 60-second home run this week. I disagree with this question 100%. Who holds the overall Major League single-season record with 73 home runs, which is
and an asterisk? Let's just say
with an asterisk. Yeah.
Yep.
It is Barry Bonds.
Yep.
Who hit 73, was roid raging and all that good stuff. So
yeah. Right. I mean, and the thing is, there's no question about that. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ball that he hit his 73rd home run with went into the bay at San Francisco, was then sold to a collector for, I think, like $100,000 or something like that. And then he burned 73 and an asterisk into the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, he put an asterisk in it, which is great. So, to me, Aaron Judge is the home run king for single season home runs because Sammy Sosa 66, Mark McGwire's 70, and Babe Ruth is was one of the guys he passed on the way this season, but
right. Babe Ruth held the record before Roger Maris. Babe Ruth had hit 60, Maris hit 61. It should be mentioned, though, that Babe Ruth and Roger Maris did it while drinking and smoking, and at least in Babe Ruth's situation, being kind of fat too.
Yeah, I mean,
I have
if
a
hot
sports
dogs,
question.
Go ahead,
yeah,
AJ.
How long did Babe Ruth hold the record?
from 1927 until 1961.
Yeah, so a long time.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
he
then
held it for a long time.
Roger Maris had it for a long time too, until I think Mark McGuire broke it first, and then
Yes.
Barry Bonds broke it.
Yeah,
Broke McGuire's record.
McGuire and Sosa had that magical year of like
Yep.
'98 where they're
Quite
going
literally
back and
magical.
forth. Yeah. The cool thing about Babe Ruth is, hot dogs were his performance enhancing drug. Like,
Exactly.
yeah. There was a asterisk put with Roger Maris's 61 home runs because Babe Ruth did it in a 154 game season.
Yep.
Roger Maris did it 162 game season. So people put an asterisk with it. I still considered Roger Maris the true home run champion, but Aaron Judge beat 60, got to 61 before the 154th game.
Yep.
So he actually is completely legit.
Yep.
And has been tested several times during the season. So,
Yeah.
All right. Question number 8. Which country announced a new plan this week to prevent any more animal species from reaching extinction?
Boy, I don't know this one.
I don't either.
Tough. All right, we're gonna have to go to AJ, who's our animal expert.
So it's Australia, US, Kenya, or India?
I'm gonna make 2 pitches, AJ, and then Dave can pitch for the other ones. So I'm gonna pitch that it could be India because there's so many Hindu and they believe that you can be reincarnated as an animal. Up to you can't be reincarnated as an insect, but certainly you can be reincarnated as most mammals, stuff like that. And so preventing those extinctions might be a big deal to a Hindu country. On the other hand, Kenya obviously has, the great wildlife parks. They depend on natural diversity. Now, the United States is filled with liberals, bleeding heart liberals. And so, but I can't see Biden making this a big deal right now while he's also ruining Kamala Harris's life work by legalizing cannabis. Well, maybe not quite that, but and then Australia, I just don't think they'd care.
Yeah.
So those are my lobbying arguments. Dave, do you want to lobby?
Okay. Dave, do you have any additional comments?
I agree with Dan pretty much on everything here. I don't think it's the United States because I think there's been a whole lot of it could be actually with the amount of election promises we're seeing come out of the Biden administration.
Midterm election promises. Gotta love it.
He did the cancer thing last week. He did student loan forgiveness. He's doing the cannabis rescheduling.
He promised to put every American on Santa's nice list.
That's right. Australia, no, I really don't see that. If I had a guess, it would be India.
So you got to decide: is it India or is it Kenya, AJ?
My first thought was Kenya because of the poaching act. That was the first thing I thought.
Let's go with it.
Let's check it.
No,
Australia.
None of us were right.
That's insane.
Well, Australia did have the big wildfires a few years ago, which killed so many animals.
Yeah,
I get that.
Sure. But that was not part of your list, by the way.
But the other thing about it is Australia's had so many invasive species that have killed off most of their native wildlife. Maybe that's what made them more sensitive to it.
Yeah.
But the rabbits, right?
Oh yeah, they got the rabbit fence in Australia.
Yeah, rabbits were not native and they had no natural predators, and so they just destroyed Australia.
Yeah.
And I think there's cats as well, right?
Well, they got
some crazy stuff.
They got basically if it can kill you, it's in Australia.
Right.
And then they got those big ass huntsman spiders. And I know that they're not venomous or anything, but if I see a huntsman spider, I'm gonna piss myself. I'm straight up just
Yeah, who's the guy who plays Thor?
Liam Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth. I think AJ is right. Right. So he he's from Australia, and he was on the Graham Norton show recently, and Graham said, we saw these pictures on your Twitter including this one with your head next to this giant poisonous spider. He's like, well, it's Australia. It doesn't really freak us out so much.
Yes. Actors from Australia are wild.
Yeah,
They are.
and they play Americans better than Americans, which is
They really do.
odd.
My friend, one of the opportunities that I regret is a friend of mine went over to Australia to coach lacrosse at a boarding school there. He's like, Dan, you should come. It's the best job. We go to the beach in the afternoon, and then after school we coach lacrosse, and then we go to the bar and we drink. I'm like, man, that does sound like a good job for my 20s, but I didn't do it.
I would have done that.
Yep.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, again, spiders and me don't get along. So, question number 9: which state announced it is legalizing jaywalking? New York, California, Texas, or Illinois? I'm gonna eliminate Texas right off the hop here.
I was gonna say, because I don't think Texas would bother with a law. Texans will just jaywalk.
Yeah.
So it's got to be an authoritarian state. Crikey.
Crikey.
How about it, readers or listeners? Do you guys have any help for us here? Don't look it up on the internet. That's cheating. Don't look it up. I'm looking at you.
You can cheat.
Janice, don't look it up.
Look it up.
But because I have no idea.
I'm thinking it's going to be a state. I think it's going to be California. Because jaywalking is one of those things that kind of leads to. This might be a police reform type thing. This is one of those small, insignificant things that leads to police controversy. Oh,
well,
it says maybe New York. I guess New York too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that. I mean, as Tupac would tell you, California knows how to party. California. Sorry. So if Janice says New York, I think we should go with Janice's guess.
All right, let's do it.
Oh,
it's California. California should be able to cross the street without formal intersection, without being ticketed.
As long as it's safe.
I mean, to do so. You get hit by a car and then you're going to get a ticket. Like,
well, no, in California, if you hit somebody with your car, you're going to get sued.
Yep.
All right, question number 10. Let's see if we can wrap it up on a strong note. Which country's polarizing presidential race will go to a second round runoff after no candidate achieved a majority of more than 50% in the ballot this week?
This one I know.
I know this one too.
I don't.
All right, AJ, what if I told you that its name should be spelled with an S?
I probably still wouldn't know, but
it should be spelled with an S instead of a Z.
An S instead of a Z?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Sweden?
Nope.
No.
Nope. See?
Brazil.
Okay.
Yep. Brazil is the world's 4th largest democracy.
It is.
That's interesting. So India, us, Indonesia, Brazil. Is that the order?
India, Indonesia, us, yeah, Brazil.
Yeah.
Oh, can people take them water while they wait in line to vote?
Yeah, illegal to bring them water while they wait in line to vote.
I'm just asking.
Yeah,
since I didn't know it was Brazil.
Yep.
Yeah, so Brazil has a race between Jair Bolsonaro, who's the current president, who's right-wing populist, and Lula da Silva, who is a socialist, who had been president before Bolsonaro, and it's basically it would be a rerun of Trump versus Hillary Clinton, although much worse Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lose-lose proposition for the people of Brazil. I mean, it's one of those cases in which Bolsonaro has been pretty terrible. I think he's a COVID denier, even though he got COVID, and really a
he's the Trump of South America.
He is. Make Brazil great again.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. But Lulu is pretty corrupt. Her vice president was a CIA spy. And so he was giving away all the secrets on trade negotiations. So Brazil kept getting screwed over in these trade negotiations with Americans. And it turns out because this vice president was working as a spy for the CIA.
Yeah. He's his reign in 2017 came to a corrupt end. I can't remember if they actually voted to they voted to recall him, I believe.
And that's how she became president, right?
Yeah, for half for
Yeah.
a little bit until Bolsonaro came to power.
Right. I think that Brazil wants a national divorce. That's what they need.
Oh.
Break up into separate states. And
All right.
yeah, so let's talk about interesting things about Brazil's capital. Okay, Brazil's capital, Brasilia. You should look it up on the map. That's thing number 5 for you to do on the internet, because it's just this giant square that they cut out of the middle of the jungle. And so,
I mean,
it's the capital here.
It's a planned city. There's a few countries that the United States did it too. Have a planned capital in the middle of the country
But it was a place that people could get to, although granted it was on a marsh.
Yeah.
But this is in the middle of the jungle, Like, you can't drive there normally. You have to. Brasilia.
There we go. Sorry. Let me get us on equal footing once again. There we go. All right, 7 out of 10, not bad.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah. The airline question in the Australia.
The airline question is astonishing me that United doesn't fly to New York City anymore. Although, they probably fly to Newark.
Well, they probably fly to New York and LaGuardia.
Yeah. So it's just JFK.
Yeah. So there are 3 major airports in the metro area and they're abandoning one. So
yeah.
All right. Let's see. Dan, you were at the Liberty Speaks thing today, right?
I was in Maryland, and it was a good time. I was happy to be there. I saw other Liberty people there. This was the second gathering at Liberty Speaks, and I was very happy to be there, representing people for Liberty, but really talking about Liberty issues. And the title of my talk was Liberty Listening as opposed to Liberty Messaging. And I'm going to give it to you guys. I was started off with a question, and you guys are both political people, and also everybody listening in. I'd like you guys to answer this. I actually gave out a $20 prize for the person who got this right at the convention. I'm ready for my close-up, by the way. Dave.
All right, hold on a second.
Thanks.
Hold on a second.
But so here's the question. See, I like that.
Yeah.
Poke. I'm not giving away a prize this time. Well, I'll tell you what, I will give away a prize at the end of the thing. Before Donald Trump, who was the last Republican? What was the last Republican ticket elected without either a Bush or a Nixon on the ticket? Elected president. What was the last Republican ticket before Donald Trump that was elected without either a Bush or a Nixon on the ticket? Hoover's right. Dave wins the prize. Now you have the advantage of that's what we call, what's the trading thing where you have the high-speed network connection, so you're able to trade faster than everybody else. Eisenhower, Janice, who was Eisenhower's vice president? Richard Nixon. So it is indeed, Dave got it. It's Herbert Hoover in 1932. That's how long it's been since the Republicans took the White House without that. It's kind of crazy. All right, so now I'm going to ask a question. And again, the audience, you guys get to chime in here. Tell me something that you know, a myth, the most popular story about George Washington's teeth. What do you know? AJ, what do you know about George Washington's teeth? What's the story that everybody says?
AJ's having issues with her.
George Washington's teeth were
Wooden. That is the common story. Now, the thing is, it's just a story. It's completely not true. George Washington never had a pair of wooden teeth. And in fact, the teeth that he was buried with were made from a variety of different animals. So there was a hippo's tooth in it, and rabbit and horses, and it was like a petting zoo, a horrific petting zoo in his mouth. Yeah, Craig, exactly right. Wooden. So I told you those two things. Now I'm going to tell you something that some people might find upsetting. George Washington had another set of teeth. Those teeth were made from slaves' teeth,
Yep.
and that makes some people unhappy. You can tell that some people say, you know what? That's just woke propaganda. But here, when I told people out at the Liberty Speaks convention, people were able to listen to it and they were able to hear it. And the reason why is because I didn't lead off with that fact. What I did was I asked you a bunch of questions and I listened to you guys as you talk back to me. When you start talking with people and you just talk to them and tell them what they say, you haven't built a relationship. But if you listen to people and you ask questions and you hear what they have to say, you've started building that relationship. And that's a critical thing for us, because when you ask a question and listen, you are telling people that what they're saying matters to them. When we do a lot of liberty messaging, a lot of what we do is we say, you know what? Let me tell you about this great solution that we have. You don't know the great solution for people. One of the things that liberty people advocate for a lot is, oh, you know what? We're going to fix the healthcare system. But if you tell that to somebody who currently exists and lives and survives because of the modern healthcare insurance program, you're not reaching them. You made an enemy by starting off with that, when in reality, that person could be allied with you on a bunch of different issues. If you start off talking to somebody about cannabis, this person might have a child who died from an overdose, and cannabis isn't the right way to reach them. Being able to listen to people is something that allows you to communicate with them. And even if you are a Liberty veteran, you should be listening to people. I used to tell people all the time, healthcare is not a right, because your healthcare is provided by a healthcare provider. And nobody has a right to somebody else's labor. Healthcare providers have a right to dispose of their labor as they see fit. And for a long time, I thought, you know what? I've got a slam dunk. I have the best possible answer to healthcare as a right. Until, excuse me, one day I had Dan Berman on my show. He said, no, Dan, you're wrong. Healthcare is a right. I'm like, what? He said, here's the thing. People should have the right to seek the healthcare that they want. And if that's cannabis, or if that's an experimental medication, or if that's buying medicine from somewhere else, buying insulin from Mexico or somewhere else, that should be their right. Nobody's obligated to provide you with healthcare, but people have a right to seek the healthcare that they want. I'm like, you know what? He's right. And that happened. I got it better at Liberty because I listened to him about it. And so now I'm going to ask you guys another question. What does the Liberty movement, what libertarians think about corporations? A lot of people say, oh, you know what? We don't care about corporations, or we're not against corporations. But actually, what's the difference between a corporation and a private partnership? The only difference is that when a corporation does something wrong, you can sue the corporation, but you can't sue the people behind the corporation. So when British Petroleum dumped 1 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, people were able to sue the corporation, but nobody who actually was responsible for it ended up having any liability. And the question is why? Why are you forbidden from suing the individual people? The reason why is because government. Corporation is a method by which government extends its immunity, its sovereign immunity, to not be sued. Do we think it makes sense that you can't sue the government? No, that doesn't make any sense. So you ought to be able to sue corporations as well. If you do that, corporations don't make any sense. So I tell the story of listening and how it affects what we're able to do. I lived in Massachusetts from 1994 till 2019. And for the first 22 years that I was there, up until 2017, I attended the Boston Tax Day rally. And for a while, actually called it the Boston Tea Party Tax Day rally before the Tea Party even existed. Then it was the Boston Tea Party Tax Day rally. Whatever it was generally taxes suck. We don't want to pay taxes anymore. And I was happy to go there. I agree with that basic idea. I'm against income tax, especially. And the rally was always held on April 15th. And then when Donald Trump was elected, the Tea Party people said, you know what? We don't think we should have this rally anymore because now we think we should support the government. We should support taxes because Donald Trump is the president. And I'm like, yeah, I don't agree with that. And of course, the Democrats were in full resistance mode. And so they wanted to have a Tea Party Tax Day rally, but they didn't think of it as a Tea Party. They thought it was a Boston Tea Party. And they invited me to speak at it. And they invited a couple other people who had been at previous Tax Day rallies. And it was held in Cambridge Square instead of on the Boston Common. And Cambridge, is the People's Republic of Cambridge. Incredibly liberal, democratic party headquarters. And so the first people who got up there who'd spoken beforehand were booed off the stage. They started talking about, the taxation is too high. And, we don't want the government to be wasting our money on illegal immigrants or, things that were not going anywhere. So I heard all this. I didn't get up there and lead off with taxation is theft. Instead, I got up and I started talking about criminal justice reform, something we agree upon, something that, I knew this audience is ready to hear that message. And as it turns out, what happened was I made a lot of new friends that day. In fact, I ended up meeting the leader of Black Lives Matter in Boston. I got to meet with them on a regular basis. And we started talking about issues that actually matter to people, things that we could work with together. And at one point in time, somebody said, oh, you know what, Dan, you lied to them. You didn't tell them everything about libertarianism. I'm like, I didn't lie to them. I talked about the places where we were allied. I explained that I was a smaller government person because I listened to them and I knew that's what they wanted to hear. That's what they needed to hear. Because once they started thinking about the idea that government can be smaller, then the idea itself is contagious. And you start applying it to other things. It's like once you learn a new skill, you start thinking about, oh, I could use this here. I could use this there. I can apply this idea of less government and better people to pharmaceuticals. I could think about buying pharmaceuticals from another country. I could think about this to occupational licensing. Maybe people who braid hair don't have to get a license from the government. I could apply this to, immigration. Maybe, if I run a hotel, I ought to be able to hire people from another country to come work at my hotel and give them jobs. All of these things that people could think about that aren't in their heads right now because nobody's ever taken the time to say, you know what? There are solutions that aren't government solutions. So the key for our message, our liberty messaging, has to be liberty listening first. There's a famous lecture. So your ninth thing that I'm assigning as a reading list for the week is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. There's a good video out there. You need to know why people do things. So before you want to talk to somebody about, the socialized healthcare system that we have right now, right? The government-run healthcare system, the ACA, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. Before you talk to them about liberty solutions, you need to ask them why they support it. You need to understand what is happening in people's lives because there are a lot of people for whom this is the best solution that they've ever seen. It's so much better than the previously terrible system that we had in place. And the fact of the matter is that the American healthcare system was incredibly biased beforehand because the government was still involved in it. We didn't have free market healthcare. One of the things that, people don't know is that the number of doctors in the United States is controlled by the AMA, controlled by the government. They did that deliberately because they don't want to flood the market with doctors because doctors know it's not actually hard to become a doctor. You don't have to be particularly smart. But if we had 2 million doctors, how much would it cost you to go see a doctor? Doctors would actually have to go out and hustle. They would be making house calls again, and we would have better health, and they would make less money. And doctors don't want that. So they use the government to limit the number of doctors. That's why, right? If you were a doctor in Germany, you are certainly qualified to be a doctor in the United States. Can you come over and be a doctor? No, because they don't want doctors to come over from other countries. And even though they obviously would, because they can make a lot more money. So listen to people. Find out why they believe what they believe. Because until you do that, you don't know what to tell them. Liberty messaging is about liberty listening. And the last thing I'll say about it is that I hope that in this process, when you start talking to people and you start listening to them, you hear what they say, you learn this one important phrase. You might be right. Because when you say that to somebody, they know that you've heard them. It is a validation of who they are and what they think. You might think that they could be wrong, but you'd have to acknowledge that you could be wrong too. And the only way you guys are going to find out what is actually right is being able to have an honest and frank conversation. And that only happens if you are able to hear them. So my plea to everybody, think about liberty listening before you think about liberty messaging. Thank you for my time. This is my TED Talk.
Word.
Thanks for my close-up, Dave. Thanks for the applause, AJ.
That was awesome.
I'm gonna drink to me.
Yes. So quickly, as we're running out of time this week, we'll skip to
click, subscribe.
Yes, click, subscribe. But a couple of news stories that we can touch on. The Russian bridge to the Crimea was blown up this week. Suspected Ukrainian action. Yeah, it's a suspected Ukrainian. They call it terrorism now. Can it be terrorism in a war zone?
I mean, the question about it is a truck bomb terrorism? And so I think that a lot of people define terrorism as not conventional warfare. But remember what the Americans did in the Revolution, right? They hid behind walls. Oh, AJ's got one.
AJ's
outstanding.
That is fan-damn-tastic.
It is. It's a good hat. Think about what the Americans did in the Revolutionary War, right? They hid behind rocks and arrows. They didn't rocks and bridges and fences. They didn't stand up in a straight line and shoot at the British the way warfare had been conducted for hundreds of years. The British considered them terrorists. So it was in a war zone. It was certainly unconventional, and I would argue it was conducted by irregulars. However, I don't know that I would call it terrorism.
I mean, would you call Bridge the movie The Bridge Over the River Kwai terrorism? I mean, it's exactly like they're cutting off a supply line to the troops from Russia to Ukraine.
Right.
I think it's a legitimate target to me. I'm surprised it has not been hit before, but Ukraine has been making so many advances lately that the narrative now has gone from we're afraid that Russia is going to win in Ukraine and take over Ukraine. And, that domino thing is now the narrative is we're afraid Russia is going to lose this thing and what they're going to do in response to it. We've had the discussions about, their nuclear posturing.
Yeah.
Will that be a response to what happened with this bridge?
Yeah, because that's the thing is that the annexation is clearly a move to justify using nuclear weapons. The Soviets and I guess the Russians now have always maintained that they would feel free to use tactical nuclear weapons to defend themselves if they were invaded.
Yeah.
And frankly, so did the West. It's one of those things that, when we were looking at the specter of a giant land war in Europe, nobody knew what would really happen. I mean, we knew that the West was much, much more well-armed, had a much higher esprit de corps. Of course, we didn't realize now. Now we know how much esprit de corps is terrible in the Russian military. Yeah. But people didn't know how it would go. And so I think both sides had this arsenal of tactical nuclear weapons that they thought they would use. And I think it's worth mentioning, I think, I don't know what it's like now. I mean, if there's a millennial there who can comment on it, but, my generation, we grew up understanding very clearly what nuclear weapons actually did. One of the things we talk about all the time is what would the effect of a 10 megaton bomb be? And if you look at a blast map in a major city, it's just disastrous. It's too terrible to contemplate. But I believe Hiroshima was a 15 kiloton bomb. And there are tactical nukes that are that size.
Yeah.
And so think about what happened with Hiroshima and think about the effect of just dropping 10 of those fired from an artillery shell, and how incredibly devastating that would be. I mean, from a military standpoint, or just from a military tactical standpoint, it's an unbelievable weapon, right? You can destroy giant swaths of artillery and tank divisions and stuff like that. One of the problems that the Russians have had is that the Ukrainians, because they're fighting on their own turf, were able to hide really well. Well, the tactical nuclear weapon, it doesn't matter how well you hide because they can destroy everything within a mile of where they drop the bomb, or lob the artillery shell. But the disastrous effect of it is so terrible. And, now we're starting to see speculation about what the Allies would do if the Russians used a tactical nuclear weapon. And did we talk about this last week, Dave? I've seen several times now, a lot of people suggesting that the Allies' response is going to be to destroy the Black Sea Fleet. If the Russians use a tactical nuke, the Allies will destroy the Black Sea Fleet.
Yeah, we talked about this last week.
Yeah, which they can easily do. Boy, it's a major escalation.
Oh yeah.
And then, I don't know.
I mean,
But
the Poles are asking for nuclear weapons to be housed in their country. You would think that the Turks might.
Well, and it's interesting because think about what would have happened if the Ukrainians had their nuclear weapons. Would they have used them in defense?
Well, I don't think Russia would invade. I mean, that's the thing. It's the mutually assured destruction is that if they had their nuclear weapons, then they would not have invaded Ukraine.
I mean, it's interesting. You think about who are the most hostile countries right now. I mean, it's an easy thing, and it brings us back nice full circle. Who are the two most hostile nuclear powers right now? No, not the Americans and the Russians. It's got to be the Indians and the Pakistanis.
Yeah.
And since they have been at this level, they've had some skirmishes, but they haven't really gone to war.
Yeah, they are much more peaceful on the border than they have been.
Although I do believe that the Pakistani Secret Service was involved in those giant terrorist attacks in India at the Red, was it the Red Fortress? The Red
Mumbai.
Mumbai.
Yeah. I think they were. I just don't. Yeah, I mean, right now, if India and Pakistan go to blows, it's you can't control it once it's out of the bottle. And I think the Indians right now are okay with the Pakistani government because if you destabilize Pakistan, what comes to power? That's the fear there is that you bring in a government that is actually much more willing to do the dumb thing.
Right. I mean, you can say what you want to about Pakistan, but they did elect what's her name, who was just assassinated? Benazir Bhutto.
Yeah.
The Pakistanis have elected women to power. They are not the radical that other states are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I agree with that. It's frightening. We live in frightening times.
We do.
I don't know what I have a bug out strategy. A bug out strategy, as I'm sure we all do. But I don't know.
I don't know. I think. I mean, to me, if it becomes like large scale nuclear war, like if it's a full launch, I might go for the white heat death. Like just go to downtown.
Get it over with.
I'm going for cardiac arrest by pizza.
Well, there you go. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go to the mall in Washington with a lawn chair and a hot dog on a stick and go, come on, motherfucker.
It's an interesting point. Yeah,
I don't think there's really what post-nuclear war world is worth suffering through.
I don't know. I mean, we're getting to the philosophical here.
Sure.
But I think that, if COVID has taught us anything, we're unbelievably resilient as a species. I do not believe that even full-scale global thermonuclear war is the end of humanity on the planet.
No, but I'd rather be in the southern hemisphere.
Well, right. So that's an interesting thing. Maybe that's part of your bug out plan. You don't have a good path to get there.
No.
But for us, we have a sailboat picked out. We would go steal it, head out south. I'm a competent sailor, and hop over. I don't think would be okay. Got to clear the DC blast radius.
Yeah.
But after that, I don't think there's much that's going to get nuked south of us except for maybe Atlanta, Fort Benning in Georgia. I guess Norfolk News.
Yeah. Norfolk will definitely.
Yeah. All right.
The Atlantic Fleet.
Yeah, I'll have to think about it anyway.
On these sweet thoughts, everybody have a great night. Sleep well.
Yeah. AJ, tell us about your movie today. How was that?
Oh, The Woman King.
Yeah.
Went to see that today with the boys. That was we always do a birthday movie. And it was amazing. I don't know a lot of the African history. I mean, obviously, I'm a little white girl in Tennessee, so no, there was not a lot of African history being taught. But honest to goodness, the depth that it went into, and the quality of the actors and the writers that they had, even the fight scenes. I mean, you could tell they had put so much thought into it. It wasn't what I expected at all, and there were twists. There were twists enough that the three of us were like, "Wait, what?" And we have to like back up and whatever our preconceived notions were of this particular scene, it wasn't about that at all. And I don't know, it was good. I laughed, I cried.
Cool.
And I mean, Viola Davis, you can't go wrong with her, like
No,
ever.
She's
Like
amazing.
just
looked
give
like
her
a
the fucking
badass
part,
in
whatever
it.
it is, give it to her because she's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, she looked badass in the previews. I've seen it. I definitely want to see this movie. So
You do.
because I'm
You
a
definitely do.
history nerd.
And I think you want to see it in a theater,
All right, I'll definitely
honestly.
check it out then. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching tonight. Thanks for checking us out on Facebook, YouTube, all that fun stuff. If you're on YouTube, give us a like, a share, a subscribe. Hit that notification button so you're notified when we go live, and we of course we try and entertain you and have a good time. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll talk to you all next week when we talk to the Virginia Liberty Party. All right, take care, everybody.
Who's going to be on for that?
Stephanie Duell, I think is her last name.
Awesome. I know Stephanie.
Yep.
That'll be a great interview. Oh, hey, I won't be here though.
Yep, you will be down
I'm
in
in Miami.
Yep. All right. Cool.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.